When God starves you of something the world worships, it is not because you are forgotten, but because you are being refined. The human mind, when denied what it craves, instantly assumes rejection. It believes that lack equals punishment. But the divine does not withhold out of cruelty. The divine withholds out of mercy. There are certain seasons in a chosen one's life when the usual human appetites, the longing for touch intimacy or sexual fulfillment, are dimmed not because they are evil, but because they are loud. Desire is a noise, and until the heart learns silence, the voice of higher purpose cannot be heard. When you are chosen to walk a path of consciousness, everything that binds you to the lower frequencies of existence must eventually fall away. The most powerful of those bindings is physical desire because it roots awareness in the body. To feel hunger, to crave affection, to want to be seen. These are deeply human impulses. But when God withholds satisfaction in these areas, He is not trying to make you less human. He is trying to make you more aware of what being human truly means. He is refining your connection to energy, teaching you how to rise above instinct and transform raw longing into sacred presence. Refinement begins in frustration. You will feel anger, confusion, and a deep emptiness inside you. You will ask, why can others indulge freely while I am denied? But the chosen cannot walk the same road as the ordinary. The path of awakening requires a purification of motive. Most people seek union through the body. They try to fill inner absence with outer contact. But when divine restraint occurs, the absence remains untouched. The hunger lingers, and in that space, awareness begins to sharpen. The withheld desire becomes a mirror, reflecting all the attachments and illusions you once mistook for love. This starvation is not physical, it is spiritual. The divine is not against pleasure, it is against slavery. When you are ruled by sexual longing, your mind moves according to impulse. Your choices are guided by need, not by clarity. So God intervenes by removing the satisfaction that kept you asleep. He turns down the volume of worldly pleasure so that you can hear the whisper of your own spirit. The refinement process is not about denial, but redirection, shifting the seat of desire from the body to the soul. What once burned in lust now begins to burn as awareness. What once sought union with another begins to seek union with truth. In this stage, solitude becomes the forge of transformation. The chosen one walks through nights of silence that feel unbearable. There is no validation, no warmth of intimacy, no exchange of passion. And yet, in that emptiness, a subtle light begins to flicker. The absence itself becomes a teacher. You begin to understand that desire is not destroyed, it is purified. The same energy that once pulled you outward now begins to pull you inward. You start to notice how much of your former life was built around chasing stimulation. You see how quickly the mind seeks distraction to escape its own stillness. And the longer the divine holds back satisfaction, the stronger your inner vision becomes. The withholding creates a kind of spiritual pressure. Like heat upon metal, it exposes impurities. You see the dependency that hid beneath your passion. You realize how often you used physical connection to avoid inner confrontation. In the absence of indulgence, you meet yourself fully, your insecurities, your loneliness, your unmet needs. This confrontation is painful, but it is sacred. Through it, the false self begins to crumble, and what remains is purity, an energy no longer defined by desire, but by discipline. This refinement is the preparation for mastery. Those who are to hold higher forms of energy cannot remain trapped in the lower expressions of it. Sexual energy, in its essence, is creative life force. The same power that fuels intuition, expression, and transformation. When it is not wasted through constant indulgence, it begins to rise within you, unlocking hidden strength and spiritual perception. You start to sense more deeply, move more consciously, and speak more truthfully. The fire that once burned with restlessness becomes a steady flame of awareness. Yet, this process cannot be rushed. The ego will try to escape it. It will say, I am done learning. Now I deserve pleasure again. But divine timing does not bend to egoic impatience. Refinement continues until attachment dissolves completely. You will know this has happened not because your desires vanish, but because they no longer rule you. You can feel attraction without being possessed by it. You can experience longing without being lost in it. The energy that once sought fulfillment through others now rests peacefully within you. When God withholds, He does not take away, He transforms. Every hunger becomes an opportunity to awaken deeper consciousness. Every denied pleasure becomes a doorway to higher freedom. What feels like starvation is often sacred protection. You are being protected from becoming consumed by what was never meant to define you. In refinement, you learn the difference between craving and connection, between touch and truth, between pleasure and peace. The divine knows that unrefined desire blinds the soul. It keeps awareness revolving around temporary satisfaction. But when that desire is purified, the same energy that once led to attachment becomes the force that sustains spiritual clarity. You begin to live from a higher center, no longer chasing, no longer begging, but simply being. The refinement strips away the need to seek validation through attention or attraction. It restores the innocence of your energy, turning what was once lust into luminous stillness. To be starved of what others easily receive is a painful privilege. It means your evolution requires a different kind of nourishment, not the touch of flesh, but the touch of awareness. The divine withholds not because you are unworthy, but because you are being trusted with a deeper lesson. The refinement teaches you that pleasure is not the highest experience, peace is. The one who has known starvation learns the true value of fulfillment. The one who has endured divine withholding learns how to love without hunger, to connect without attachment, to exist without craving. The chosen are refined through what they are denied, until what remains in them is no longer desire. But divine strength, the body is the vessel through which life experiences itself, but for many it has become the master. Most people live in reverse. They allow their bodies to command their spirit, their impulses to dictate their direction, their sensations to define their truth. But when the divine begins to awaken within you, this order must be corrected. The moment awareness starts to expand, you begin to see that the body is not who you are. It is merely the garment through which your consciousness moves. The divine uses the body as a tool, yet when the tool becomes the ruler, confusion and suffering begin. The body has needs, yes, but it also has limits. It hungers, it tires, it desires, it fears. Its instincts are ancient, shaped by survival. But the soul, the inner witness, is not limited by such instincts. The soul seeks evolution, not just comfort. When you mistake the vessel for the master, you start living for sensations, chasing pleasure, avoiding pain, endlessly serving the temporary. You wake up in the morning and move according to what feels good or what feels safe, not what is true. The body says, feed me, entertain me, satisfy me, and the mind obeys. Slowly, awareness is forgotten. The body becomes the driver, and consciousness becomes the passenger. To walk the path of truth is to reverse this order. It is to reclaim authority from the flesh and return it to the spirit. The body is sacred, but it is not supreme. It was given to you so that you may learn through it, not be enslaved by it. Every impulse that arises within the body is an opportunity to practice mastery. Hunger teaches moderation, desire teaches awareness, fatigue teaches stillness, and pain teaches presence. But when you allow the body to dictate your identity, you lose the lesson and fall into attachment. In every great spiritual tradition, self-mastery begins with awareness of the body. Not rejection of it, but observation. When you observe the body without identification, you start to see how it reacts, how it craves, how it resists. You notice that emotions are sensations moving through flesh, not eternal truths. You see how easily pleasure can control you, how quickly pain can distort perception. This awareness does not make you cold or detached. It makes you free. You begin to act, not react. You start to use the body consciously as a tool for expression, not a source of identity. The one who sees the body as a vessel understands that pleasure is not evil, but neither is it the purpose of existence. The body was not designed only to experience comfort. It was designed to refine consciousness. Through hunger, you learn gratitude. Through fatigue, you learn rest. Through desire, you learn self-restraint. The vessel constantly teaches balance, yet most people ignore the lesson because they are busy worshipping the sensations instead of learning from them. They serve lust instead of love, comfort instead of clarity, indulgence instead of insight. But the moment you recognize the body's role, everything begins to shift. When the body becomes your servant, energy begins to obey your awareness. The restless impulses calm, the endless craving quiets. You start to feel strength returning, not the strength of muscle, but the strength of presence. You realize you are not the hunger, not the pain, not the longing. You are the space in which these things appear and dissolve. The body is constantly changing, cells dying, regenerating, aging, yet the one who observes remains unchanged. To live from that awareness is to live in truth. There are moments when divine discipline will confront the body directly. You will be asked to sit in silence when every cell wants to move. You will be guided to fast when the stomach cries for food. You will be called to solitude when the heart seeks company. These are not punishments, they are lessons in mastery. Every act of restraint polishes awareness. Every denial of impulse refines the vessel. Slowly, the body becomes transparent, no longer a cage of cravings, but a channel for energy. When you eat consciously. When you rest completely. When you move with intention. Nothing is wasted because everything is done from awareness. But this transformation does not happen without struggle. The body will resist the loss of control. It will tempt you, test you, and try to reclaim dominion. It will use fear and pleasure as its weapons. It will whisper that your cravings are your truth, that your impulses are your freedom. Yet true freedom is not the ability to indulge every desire, it is the ability to choose not to. When awareness governs the body, you no longer chase fulfillment through sensation. You create fulfillment through presence. The chosen ones are often tested most deeply in this way. Their path requires them to master the body, not escape it. To walk among desires and remain untouched, to experience pain and remain centered, to use the vessel but not worship it. This is the silent discipline that builds unshakable power. The divine withholds indulgence so that the chosen can learn endurance. It slows the gratification so that they can feel the subtle difference between instinct and intuition. The more mastery grows, the more the vessel becomes aligned with spirit. The body no longer pulls awareness down. It supports it in rising higher. To see the body as a vessel is to finally step out of identification with it. You stop saying, I am hungry, and start saying, hunger is arising. You stop saying, I am angry, and start seeing, anger is moving through the body. You become the observer, not the actor. And from that place, power begins to build. You are no longer moved by every wave of sensation. The ocean of the body still moves, but the awareness remains vast and still beneath it. This is where the soul begins to rule. The vessel is temporary, fragile, and sacred. It is meant to serve consciousness, not command it. When the body is seen in its true place, as a bridge between the seen and the unseen, life becomes harmonious. The senses no longer rule the spirit. The spirit moves through the senses with clarity. The hunger of the flesh transforms into the nourishment of awareness. The same body that once pulled you into attachment becomes the temple through which truth expresses itself. The body bows, the mind quiets, and awareness stands tall. Desire transforms into devotion when the fire of longing ceases to seek satisfaction in the outer world and begins to burn inward, illuminating the path toward the divine. At first, desire is blind. It moves through the senses, searching for completion in form, in touch, in possession. It believes fulfillment lies in what can be attained, a person, a moment, a sensation. But the nature of desire is restlessness. The moment it is fed, it grows again. Every satisfaction is temporary, and every pleasure soon fades into emptiness. It is through this endless cycle of craving and disappointment that the soul begins to awaken. Slowly, one starts to see that desire is not the enemy. It is simply misplaced energy, an unrefined longing for something eternal. When the divine begins to work upon you, it does not destroy desire, it transforms it. The same force that once drove you toward the external begins to turn you inward. What was once lust becomes yearning. What was once craving becomes calling. The fire remains, but its direction changes. You begin to feel the ache of something deeper than flesh, deeper than companionship, deeper than satisfaction. It is the ache of remembrance, the faint memory of your true essence, the silent call of something vast within you that no worldly pleasure can quiet. This is where devotion is born. Devotion is not an emotion, it is transfigured desire. It arises when the hunger for fulfillment no longer looks for a body to merge with, but for truth itself. Desire wants to consume. Devotion wants to surrender. Desire says, I want to have. Devotion says, I want to become. The same energy that once pulled you outward now begins to bow inward. The longing does not vanish, it deepens. It becomes pure, cleaner, quieter. The chosen ones know this transformation well, for they are often led through long periods of emptiness where all ordinary desires fail to satisfy. It is in that famine that desire ripens into devotion. In the early stages, this transformation feels like loss. You may feel disconnected from worldly pleasures, yet not fully connected to spirit. You may feel a strange emptiness, as if the old desires have died but the new devotion has not yet taken root. This is the in-between state, where the soul is being rewired. The divine is redirecting your longing, removing its old objects, and teaching it to move toward the unseen. What was once passion for people or experiences becomes passion for presence itself. You start to crave silence the way you once craved excitement. You start to seek truth the way you once sought affection. Desire, when it matures, realizes its true purpose was never about what it chased. Every form of desire was an echo of the soul's longing for union. Whether through love, success, or pleasure, what you truly wanted was to dissolve the sense of separation, to feel whole, to merge with something greater than yourself. But the world could never offer that permanently. So desire kept you moving, restless, unsatisfied, always seeking. The divine allows this restlessness until the moment you are ready to see through it. When that moment comes, the same restless fire becomes devotion, no longer chasing fragments, but yearning for the source itself. The transformation is subtle but profound. In desire, there is tension. In devotion, there is surrender. Desire clings, devotion releases. Desire burns the body, devotion purifies the soul. Desire says, I need to be fulfilled. Devotion says, I am fulfilled when I serve. One is self-centered, the other selfless. Yet both begin from the same fire. The divine does not ask you to extinguish the flame, only to let it burn in a higher direction. When the flame of desire rises from the base to the heart, love is born. When it rises from the heart to awareness, devotion appears. Through devotion, the energy of desire becomes radiant. It no longer drains you, it nourishes you. Every thought, every action begins to align with purpose. You start to move not out of want, but out of reverence. What once was lust for life becomes love for life. You start to see beauty not in ownership, but in observation. The same eyes that once searched for attraction now find divinity in simplicity. In a leaf, in a breath, in a moment of silence. Devotion cleanses perception. It turns ordinary living into sacred practice. But this transformation requires inner discipline. The ego resists surrender because it thrives on wanting. It fears the stillness of devotion because, in devotion, the self dissolves. To let desire transform, you must allow the burning. You must sit in the fire of longing without running to extinguish it through pleasure or distraction. You must let the energy rise, not by repression, but by awareness. When you look directly into your desire, without judgment, without indulgence, it begins to change shape. Awareness transmutes it. The more you stay present with it, the more it loses its grip and turns into pure life force, flowing upward toward consciousness. The saints, sages, and masters who walk in peace were not born without desire. They simply allowed desire to complete its journey. They followed it to its source. They discovered that every longing was a doorway to devotion, every craving a disguised invitation to awaken. When the heart becomes purified through awareness, devotion emerges naturally. It does not need belief or ritual. It is the spontaneous reverence that arises when one sees that everything is divine. The transformation of desire into devotion is the birth of inner freedom. In devotion, you no longer chase pleasure, you embody peace. You no longer seek love, you become love. Every act becomes worship, not of something external, but of the sacred that lives within all things. You begin to see that desire was never meant to imprison you, it was meant to guide you back home. When it is directed outward, it binds. When directed inward, it liberates. To live in devotion is to live as a vessel of the divine, moved not by the cravings of the body but by the currents of awareness. The energy that once created attachment now creates alignment. What once consumed you now consecrates you. Desire, the restless student, finally kneels before devotion, the silent teacher, and in that surrender, the fire finds its true purpose. To illuminate the path toward oneness, silence within the flesh creates strength in the spirit, because the body is not only a structure of muscles and bones, but also a temple of vibration. Every thought, every emotion, every desire echoes through it. Most people live with noise inside their flesh, noise created by unbalanced desire, constant stimulation, tension, and restlessness. Their bodies become battlegrounds for conflicting impulses. The nervous system stays in motion, the breath grows shallow, and the mind becomes a slave to the body's movements. True spiritual strength cannot emerge from such chaos. It can only grow where stillness has been cultivated, where silence has been allowed to inhabit the flesh like sacred air. The silence spoken of here is not the absence of sound, but the absence of inner turbulence. When the body no longer reacts to every thought and emotion, when it can remain unmoved amidst craving and agitation, then true silence begins to take root. It is not achieved through suppression but through awareness. You begin to feel the subtle energies that move through the flesh, the tension behind desire, the contraction behind fear, the heat behind anger. And instead of feeding them, you simply observe. This observation is like light entering a dark room. The energies begin to settle, the breath deepens, and the body becomes a still vessel. Within that stillness, the spirit begins to rise. The power of the spirit is not loud, it is silent, steady, and unshakable. When silence fills the flesh, the mind becomes clear like a calm lake. Awareness can then reflect truth without distortion. The storms of emotion no longer dictate action, and impulses no longer hold command. The silence within becomes a fortress, invisible yet unbreakable. This is the strength that no physical training can produce, because it does not come from force, it comes from mastery. The body is the first battlefield of spiritual growth. It is where the unseen wars of energy take place. When you train the body to rest in silence, you are training the spirit to rule without resistance. Every temptation to move, to speak, to react becomes a test of endurance. Every restraint builds invisible power. In the stillness of meditation, when the body becomes motionless and the senses are quiet, you begin to notice how alive silence truly is. Beneath the still flesh, a current of energy flows, subtle, vibrant, eternal. That current is the spirit, and it grows stronger every time the flesh remains silent. But silence within the flesh does not come easily. The human body has been conditioned to chase stimulation. It seeks comfort, pleasure, distraction, and escape. To sit still feels like death to the ego, because in stillness, its illusions start to dissolve. The restless mind will tell you that silence is emptiness, that you are wasting time, that you should move, eat, touch, speak. Yet when you resist these impulses with awareness, not repression, something begins to shift. You start to feel a subtle space growing between your thoughts and your body. You are no longer the movement, you are the witness of it. This witnessing is where strength begins. The ability to observe your body's cravings without acting on them builds spiritual muscle. Each time you resist reacting to anger, lust, fear, or restlessness, the spirit becomes stronger. This strength is invisible, but it changes everything. It gives you presence, a quiet power that others can feel even when you say nothing. When the flesh is silent, your energy becomes centered. The spirit radiates without leakage. Words become fewer but carry more weight. Actions become deliberate. The outer calm becomes a reflection of the inner command. Silence in the flesh is not weakness, it is mastery over impulse. It is the ability to stand in the middle of chaos and remain unshaken. The warrior who moves from silence strikes without hesitation. The sage who speaks from silence teaches without ego. The healer who touches from silence transmits peace. This power cannot be faked, it is cultivated through years of inner discipline. Through learning to sit with discomfort, to breathe through temptation, to let noise dissolve instead of reacting to it. Every emotion, every desire, every bodily urge is energy. When you act upon it unconsciously, the energy disperses outward. When you remain silent within it, the energy refines and rises inward. It moves from the lower centers of instinct toward the higher centers of awareness. The same energy that could create destruction becomes the energy that builds insight. The silence within the flesh redirects the current of life, turning outward chaos into inward harmony. This is why ancient traditions taught the importance of stillness, breath control, and mindful movement. They understood that the body must first be trained to obey awareness. You cannot enter higher states of consciousness while the body still trembles with unmastered impulses. The silence within the flesh is the foundation upon which spiritual awakening stands. It teaches endurance, patience, and the art of waiting without agitation. The one who has learned to be silent in the body no longer needs to escape their experience. They can sit in pain, in longing, in emptiness, and remain whole. As silence deepens, sensitivity grows. You begin to feel the subtler layers of existence, the pulse of life within every breath, the rhythm of energy moving through your veins, the quiet intelligence behind every heartbeat. You realize that silence is not nothingness, it is fullness without noise. In that state, the spirit communicates directly. Insight arises effortlessly, intuition becomes clear, and action flows without resistance. The body no longer stands as a barrier to spirit, but becomes its perfect instrument. The strength born from silence is unlike any external power. It cannot be taken broken or corrupted. It does not depend on circumstances or approval. It exists because you have mastered yourself. The storms that used to move you now pass through without shaking your core. This is inner sovereignty, the point where the body obeys the command of awareness, not the pull of impulse. The flesh becomes calm, the senses purified, and the spirit unchained. When silence fills the flesh, you walk differently, breathe differently, speak differently. Each movement becomes precise, intentional, and filled with presence. The world begins to slow around you because you are no longer reacting to it. You are observing it. In this silence, the spirit gathers strength not through doing, but through being. The body becomes transparent, and life flows through it like wind through an open field. The noise of the world still exists, but within you, there is only stillness, and from that stillness, an unshakable strength quietly grows. Isolation is the divine's way of reordering energy, because when everything external falls away, the truth of your internal landscape is revealed. Most people are terrified of being alone because silence exposes what distraction conceals. The noise of others, the comfort of attention, the rhythm of constant movement, all of it keeps you from meeting yourself fully. But when the divine isolates you, it is not an act of abandonment. It is a sacred intervention. The people who once energized you begin to drift. The pleasures that once entertained you lose their taste, and the paths that once seemed certain suddenly dissolve. In that vast emptiness, life is no longer moving according to your plans. It is moving according to divine order. Isolation becomes the space where your energy, long scattered in 1,000 directions, begins to return home. Every soul carries energy that has been entangled with others through relationships, attachments, conversations, expectations, and desires. These connections, though natural, create invisible cords that pull awareness outward. Over time, the self forgets its own frequency. It becomes a mirror reflecting the energies it absorbs from the world. The divine, seeing this, begins the process of reordering. Isolation is the method. It is the removal of external interference so that your energy can recalibrate. The sudden quietness that follows separation is not punishment, it is purification. It allows all that is borrowed to fall away and all that is authentic to rise again. In isolation, your awareness is forced inward. The roles you played for others dissolve. The masks you wore for belonging begin to crumble. At first, this stripping feels like loss, but it is actually liberation. When no one is watching, the need to perform disappears. The soul begins to breathe again. You start to sense your own energy, not as a reaction to others, but as a vibration that is self-sustaining. This recognition is the first stage of reordering. It is the moment the divine begins to separate what is truly yours from what is not. Yet isolation is not comfortable. The ego experiences it as exile because it cannot feed on solitude. It thrives on validation and comparison. It fears silence because silence dismantles identity. The more the divine draws you into solitude, the louder the ego protests. It will tell you that you are being forgotten, that life has left you behind, that you are wasting time. But the truth is that while the ego panics, the soul is being rewired. The energy that was once spent maintaining outer attachments begins to turn inward. The heart that sought recognition begins to seek alignment. Slowly, the fragments of your energy begin to merge into one coherent field. This reordering process is both destructive and creative. It destroys patterns that no longer serve your evolution, and it creates new structures capable of holding higher frequencies of awareness. The divine often isolates those who are being prepared for a new level of consciousness because the old energy field cannot contain what is coming. In stillness, the nervous system relaxes, the emotional body detoxifies, and the mental body clears. It is like emptying a vessel before refilling it. The emptiness feels unbearable at first because the old identity is dying. But what is dying is illusion, not essence. Isolation exposes energy leaks. When you are alone, you notice how much of your vitality used to flow toward proving yourself, pleasing others, or escaping discomfort. The divine shows you these patterns not to shame you, but to redirect your energy toward alignment. Every hour spent in solitude becomes an act of collection. What was once dispersed in constant reaction now gathers in stillness. You start to feel your power condense, quieter, heavier, more centered. You begin to realize that peace is not found in connection, it is found in clarity. In isolation, time slows down. The absence of constant stimulation allows awareness to expand. You begin to see how deeply the external world had shaped your inner rhythm. You recognize how your emotions were tied to others' moods, how your thoughts mirrored collective noise, how your energy bent to fit environments that did not match your frequency. As the silence deepens, these influences fall away. What remains is raw presence, unfiltered, unrefined, and true. This is where the reordering happens at the most subtle level. The divine rearranges the flow of your energy so that it serves evolution instead of attachment. This reordering also affects the body. You may feel fatigue, restlessness, or bursts of vitality as energy moves into new channels. Old wounds rise to the surface because they are being cleansed. Emotional waves appear not as punishment but as release. The isolation becomes a crucible, burning away distortion until your energy vibrates in harmony again. You begin to understand that what the world calls loneliness is often sacred surgery. The divine is realigning the flow of your life force so that it no longer leaks into noise. Many resist isolation because they do not yet see its purpose. They rush to fill the silence with company or distraction, fearing the confrontation it brings. But the chosen learn to endure it. They sit with the discomfort until it becomes peace. They allow the dismantling because they trust that what falls apart was never real to begin with. In that patience, they discover a deeper truth, that isolation is not separation from life but deeper communion with it. When the external dissolves, the internal awakens. In this state, awareness becomes magnetic. You no longer need to chase connection or opportunity. Energy begins to find its proper arrangement around you. Relationships that are aligned return in harmony, while those that drain you disappear naturally. The divine's reordering is always perfect. When your energy field stabilizes, life reorganizes itself to match your vibration. What once required effort begins to flow effortlessly. The silence that once felt heavy now feels sacred. To be isolated by the divine is to be chosen for refinement. It means your energy is being recalled from fragmentation and restructured into wholeness. Every period of solitude is an initiation into deeper power. The world outside may remain unchanged, but within, something vast is being rearranged. You begin to sense the quiet architecture of divine order working through every moment, reshaping you from the inside out, teaching you that isolation was never emptiness. It was alignment in disguise. This is the silent journey of transformation that every soul chosen for awakening must pass through. The divine often begins this process by withholding. It starves you of what once fed you, not because it seeks your suffering, but because it seeks your purification. What once gave comfort no longer satisfies. The people who once affirmed you no longer understand you. The desires that once fueled you begin to dissolve into emptiness. You find yourself in a barren space where nothing external nourishes you anymore. This is the stage of divine starvation. The sacred drought that empties the soul of dependence. In this stage, every craving surfaces. The hunger for validation, the thirst for affection, the longing for success, all of it rises to be seen. Yet none of it can be fulfilled. No matter how hard you reach, it feels as though the divine has turned its face away. But what is truly happening is an alchemical process. The outer sources of nourishment are being removed so that the inner source can awaken. The divine knows that as long as your sustenance comes from what is temporary, your energy will remain unstable. So it begins to starve you not to destroy you, but to teach you where true nourishment lies. The starvation touches every layer of being. Emotionally, you feel abandoned. Mentally, you feel lost. Spiritually, you feel disconnected. Even the pleasures that once soothed the body lose their taste. It is a time when prayers feel unanswered, efforts feel unseen, and purpose feels distant. But in the silence of this famine, something sacred begins to stir. The spirit, no longer able to feed on the external, begins to turn inward. You start to notice that beneath the hunger, there is awareness that never starves. Beneath the emptiness, there is a presence that remains untouched. The divine leads you through this desolation so that you can discover that your true nourishment was never outside you. The body, accustomed to stimulation, protests. The mind, addicted to control, rebels. The heart aches with the memory of fulfillment. Yet the soul watches patiently, knowing that this starvation is medicine. Every hunger that arises is a lesson. The hunger for love teaches you that love without presence is illusion. The hunger for attention teaches you that validation is a temporary drug. The The hunger for pleasure teaches you that desire without awareness is bondage. Slowly, each unfulfilled craving burns away an old layer of illusion. The more you endure the starvation, the purer your energy becomes. In this purification, awareness expands. You begin to sense the subtle difference between need and truth. You realize how much of your life was spent chasing what could never complete you. You see that your restlessness was not a sign of lack, but a symptom of misdirection. The famine strips you bare, leaving you with nothing but essence. It is in that nakedness that divine grace begins to move. For when there is nothing left to cling to, the heart becomes open, raw, empty, receptive. This emptiness is not a void, it is the soil of rebirth. As the process deepens, silence begins to fill the space that once held craving. The hunger softens, the tension in your chest loosens. You start to feel small moments of peace not dependent on circumstance. Peace that arises from stillness itself. It feels fragile at first, like a flame that could be extinguished by the next wave of emotion. But with each breath, it grows stronger. The more you surrender to starvation, the more the divine begins to fill you in unseen ways. This is the beginning of overflow. Overflow does not arrive suddenly. It builds slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. You begin to feel energy returning, but it is different now, refined, steady, quiet. The joy that arises has no cause. The love that flows no longer clings to anyone. The peace that expands no longer depends on silence or solitude. The same spaces that once felt empty now feel full, because awareness itself has become your nourishment. What once was hunger now becomes gratitude. The divine that starved you begins to pour through you, not as external blessings but as inner abundance. In overflow, the energy that once sought to consume begins to give. You no longer need to take from the world because the source flows within you. You find yourself loving without fear, speaking without demand, acting without seeking reward. The flow of energy moves through you effortlessly because there is no resistance left. The famine has emptied the vessel of all egoic need, making room for divine fullness. You realize that starvation was never about loss. It was preparation. The divine starved you so that you would no longer mistake fragments for wholeness. This overflow manifests in every part of life. Your presence becomes nourishment to others. Your words begin to carry weight not because they are clever, but because they come from depth. People sense peace in your silence, trust in your stillness, and power in your gentleness. The energy that once scattered in desire now radiates through awareness. You become a channel through which the divine expresses itself, not because you sought it, but because you became empty enough to hold it. The paradox of this journey is that the same energy that once cried out in starvation becomes the very energy that now overflows. What once burned in longing now shines in love. What once trembled in fear now stands in stillness. You begin to understand that the divine was never withholding from you. It was teaching you to receive differently. The starvation phase trained your vessel to contain higher frequencies, to hold light without distortion, to love without expectation. When you live from overflow, you no longer cling to outcomes. You give freely, not to prove, but to express. You move through life with a quiet confidence born of trust. Even when challenges appear, the inner well does not run dry. You know now that fulfillment does not come from what you possess, but from what you allow to flow through you. The energy that once searched outward has completed its circle. It has returned home to its source. From starvation to overflow, the divine rewrites your relationship with energy. It teaches you that deprivation and abundance are not opposites but stages of the same transformation. The emptiness was not emptiness at all. It was the clearing required for fullness to arrive. The hunger that once consumed you became the fire that refined you. What was taken from you was only what you were never meant to depend on. The divine withholds until your dependence breaks, and then, when you are finally still, it floods you with what cannot be lost.